everyone, this is Roy, and my project is on polio and its economic and social impacts on the people of the United States.
That knowing Ed Murrow led me to know today's Open Mind guest, Dr. Jonas Salk, whom my generation, and my parents, and my children's, will surely always revere as the brilliant medical scientist whose pioneering research effectively eradicated infantile paralysis as the literal scourge of this nation. No parent could forget the fears of summer as the dreaded polio season came upon us until just 30 years ago, in the spring of 1955, when Murrow broadcast the success of the Salk vaccine. What he said to the young scientist at the time was, "Young man, a great tragedy has just befallen you. You have lost your anonymity." And so Jonas Salk had, though gaining the opportunity to have us listen so respectfully to the larger themes he would develop in the decades to follow, as his plea that we be wise and good ancestors. Dr. Salk, I really am delighted to have you here with me today.
See you again.
And it is, of course, a subject to examine what you really meant by being a wise ancestor, a good ancestor.
Well, I'm sure that just as we look back into the past to those who've preceded us, we recognize that some of those who've gone before have been wiser than others. And the question that I have been asking in recent years, amongst others, is, are we being good ancestors? And I pose that question because I believe that the future generations will look back upon us and judge us as to whether we have been wise or whether we have been profligate and wasteful and destructive of the opportunities for their future as well as the future of generations to come.
Right, so to start with, polio is a virus, and viruses had gone undiscovered for most of the 19th century. Discovered in 1892, where scientists were finally able to create a filter small enough to catch them. Viruses are a lot smaller than bacteria, and they were catching these entities and not knowing what they were. So most people, for a while, were getting polio, being paralyzed without actually knowing what was causing it. There are a couple of electron microscope pictures. The electron microscope was discovered early 20th century, I think. The picture on the left there is one of the most classic examples of a virus. The head on the top is a protein coat, and that houses a bunch of RNA, which is a different form of DNA. And they kind of have that pillar there and some little legs. I don't know if it's that easy to see, but they have these kind of leg-like structures that are receptor proteins. So what happens is they'll bind to a cell membrane with those legs. They'll either get enveloped by the cell or they'll forcibly insert the RNA into the cell. And once the RNA is in there, it'll take over the cell and re-engineer it to start producing more viruses. And eventually the cell membrane will break because too many viruses have been produced. So here I've drawn up a kind of an artist's rendition of a typical the viral structure of polio. Those legs there are the receptor proteins previously mentioned. They'll bind to the cell membrane, and this cell is a nerve cell. So what makes polio so dangerous is that they do that same thing I described in the last slide, where they take over a cell and cause it to lyse because so many viruses are produced and the cell just dies and breaks. Polio attacks nerve cells, and that's what causes the paralysis, is that it causes too many nerve cells to die and people lose control of their legs. So what I've drawn, the receptor proteins there, they'll bind to the cell membrane. The cell will take in the virus with the outer shell there is called a capsid, and those strands in there are the RNA, and the cell will take in the virus as though it were taking in some nutrients due to those proteins there, and kill the cell from there. So polio had a number of economic impacts on the United States, mostly for the good, it seems. In the long term, investing in the vaccines stopped us from having to produce iron lungs and iron leg bindings, which were costing a lot of money. Just basically saving children's lives, preserving their independent movement so they can contribute back economically as they age. People with disabilities have a hard time contributing to the workforce, and I guess you could consider that as kind of economic dead weight. A number of relief efforts, fundraisers for research were started, March of Dimes being a prominent one, which still acts today, I think, with premature birth. I haven't read any literature on this, but I'm sure there might have been some people as snake oil salesmen selling cure-alls for polio, kind of like how people still sell alternative medicine today. Probably just something to consider. I'm not sure how big of an economic effect that really had. And the final one, today people are still trying to eradicate polio. It's very prolific in Africa. Basically the long-term economics of this is no more vaccines, no more production, we'll save money, and that's about it, I think. So polio had a number of social impacts on the people of the United States. Firstly, in disability rights, people with polio are being discriminated against and stigmatized for their infection. They're unable to move. They're being kept in institutions where they need people to help them live. People vying for disability rights want to keep the disabled contributing to the workforce in some way, still going to school, and keeping ties with their family, so they're not considered socially dead. President Roosevelt and his polio was a struggle for him. He was diagnosed at age 39 in 1921 before he became president in 1933. He had to keep up a public appearance of being strong, healthy, keep people's morale up, keep them willing to fight. And finally, people were just plain scared of polio. It was taking children's childhoods away from them. Babies were being born into iron lungs, which are big metal casings with a negative pressure system that keeps a baby's lungs breathing for them after their nerve cells have been destroyed. And this outrage, these children losing their childhoods, unable to walk, unable to breathe, is what spurs on a very quick research effort in vaccine production. Polio terrifies the American people. It's a seasonal disease. It's most prolific during the summertime. So instead of summer being a time for relaxation and social gathering, polio keeps people apart and keeps them fearful.
The centenary of my father's birth is an opportunity not only to look back at what was done in polio and the Salk Institute, but to look forward. What can be built from here? How can this legacy be continued?
There was a relatively young boy with him. I would say he was 12 or 13, I suspect. This is Dr. Jonas Salk. He cured polio. And the little boy looked at him and said, "What is polio?" And Jonas was beaming because he felt he has finally achieved it, because this kid doesn't even know the disease polio.